All right. Here we are. It's been a few months since I've been on stage, and honestly, it feels like it's been a few months since I've been here. Been traveling a lot. Before we dive into the message, because I haven't been around in a while, I just want to say thank you. Many of you know this last year has been really challenging for my family. We lost my sister a couple months ago, and every week, I've had people texting me, calling, coming up, praying for us, not just over the last couple months, but the last year. And, what it's modeled, JD talked about how we're a church on mission, so we step out and we live out on mission with other people, but you've also done that with my family. And you've loved us well, you've cared for us, you've sent us text, and just surrounded us, and that's what the church does. They love people in every season of life. And you guys have continually done that, and I'm grateful for that. Another little thing, since we're opening the prayer room, I put together a book on prayer earlier this year. I've got 3 copies with me. If you want one, they're sitting by my bag. Just take one. They're right here. And that's my little gift to you. Okay, we ready? We're diving in. Today, we are talking. It's going to seem like we're talking about generosity, but what we're talking about is identity. See, generosity is not something we achieve. Generosity is something that we are. Earlier this year, I started a new job this year. I worked on staff at our church for many years. In January, I came on staff, came into another role with an organization called Rivergate Foundation, and we were meeting as a team, and I just come on, and they were like, all right, hey, we got to set up some payroll stuff, so what's Chris's job? And one of the board members goes, he's our chief giving officer. And I was like, first of all, that's a sweet title. I'm not usually into titles, but that one's pretty cool. And we were talking later, and I was like, man, that hit me different, because that's really cool. And I said, one day I hope to live up to that. And he said, hold on, time out. The reason that came out so quickly from me is because I've watched your life and you've lived that. He's like, remember, generosity is not about a number. It's about a spirit that we carry, and that spirit is connected to trust. Generosity for us, if we're going to step into it, is going to first be about trust. See, I would bet that of all the people in here, every single one of you would say, I want to be a generous person. I don't think there's any Ebenezer Scrooges in here. But here's the deal. When we craft a definition of generosity, you know who it always excludes? Ourselves. See, because we think generosity is something that we have to achieve based on what somebody else has done. We put somebody else up there and say, well, that's what a generous life looks like. See, we've made generosity about levels rather than about likeness. And the truth is generosity is about likeness. You, hear me, you are generous because you are made in the image of God. And God is generous. So when the mirror is held up to you, you are made in his likeness. So today's message is not about you trying to figure out what are the 7 steps that I need to take in order to become a generous person. Today is about holding up a mirror so that you can see the likeness of God in you. Because when we start to believe what is true about who we are, it starts to impact how we live. And so we have to realize that generosity with our time, with our energy, with our resources, it's not about how much. It's about, do I trust you, God, to fill in the gaps that my generosity is going to create in my life. Because I'm going to need that. We want to be generous, but what keeps us from stepping into it? What keeps us from really looking at that mirror and going, I am that generous person? And I think there's actually some invisible walls that we hit that slow us down in this journey. And so we're going to name them this morning, because when you name what the lie is, it makes it so much easier to go over, under, around, or through it. However you got to get by it. But when we name what the lie is, we're able to actually get there. So the Barna Group did a study. They do studies all the time. And one of the ones came out and said that 84% of Christians say that generosity is extremely important in their life. Of that 84, less than half said they practice it regularly. What that tells us is there's a disconnect. And the reason there's a disconnect is because these invisible walls create barriers that keep us from getting there. Did you know that the Department of Labor did a study and found that 23% of Americans, less than a quarter of Americans, volunteer once a year? Once. An entire year. And typically, when they do volunteer, it's for 1 hour. 1 hour a year. So there's something, but we would all say, no, generosity really matters. So what is it telling us? What it's telling us is that we're maxed out. We say around here, generosity is our standard, but how many of us feel generosity is a stretch? Man, it takes a lot to get there. And it's because we've got these loops, these narratives that are keeping us from seeing what is actually true. The likeness is that I am a generous person because I am made in the image of God, and God is extreme in his generosity. But there's a resistance. So let's name them. Let's go after them. Let's figure out what they are and talk about them. The first one is the fear of not having enough. Psychologists have started calling this the scarcity mindset. In church circles, you'll hear it called the poverty mindset. What it is it says, if I give this, how do I know I'll have what I need later? If I help someone else, who's going to take care of me? See, the thing about the scarcity mindset is it's not wrapped up in a number. It's wrapped up in a narrative. It's a narrative that can play no matter what your circumstances and no matter what situation you find yourself in. Whether someone's asking you to write a check or someone's asking to give your presents. Scarcity is not a number. It's a narrative that we believe that says if I give this, I might go without. And what it boils down to is this reality of, do I trust that if I give what I have, God's going to give back to me what I need? And that's a hard thing for us to wrestle with. Is it really true? Is it going to happen? See, we tend to think that we will be generous in our lives when we reach a certain point. When we get somewhere. And it's usually not where you are. It's always somewhere you haven't yet got to. But let me encourage you today. If this one's hitting with you, we're going to hit on 3 more. But if this one's already hitting with you, let me just say, what you need to lean into is this idea of saying, God, I want to grow in my trust. Rather than saying, God, I want to grow in my generosity, let's reframe it and say, God, I want to grow in my trust. I want to grow in my trust today. I want to grow in my trust that you are going to care for me, that you are going to take time to see me. One of the other things we face is the overload. Sociologists have said we're living in a time called we're living in a season called a time famine. We have more tools than ever to be efficient and productive, but we have less margin than we've ever had. 80% of Americans say they feel rushed every day. Every day, they're rushed. So when generosity comes knocking at the door, it's not that we don't have a desire, it's we don't actually have the space. When you look at that compared to the life of Jesus, you see that Jesus stopped when people were hurried. He listened to those that felt ignored. He noticed a bleeding woman, interrupted his walk, stopped everything. He invited children to him and said, I have time for this. I have space for this. Generosity, again, sometimes it's about resources. Often it's about presence. Am I present enough to what's going on? Am I slowed down enough? Have I created space and margin in my life? Extrapolate that out to whatever you're feeling the tension on generosity. Is it with your money? Is it with your time? Is it with your energy that you have? Parents, is it with what you're trying to give to your kids? Are you being generous in that way? Sometimes it's not about do I have the desire, it's actually do I have the space? Have I created the margin in my life? Do I fight to create the margin in my life? Do I work at it? Another one that we hit is the illusion of control. The illusion of control. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9, Paul says, whoever sows sparingly will reap sparingly. Whoever sows generously will reap generously. I'm not a farmer. I don't know if you could tell. We planted some things, we kill them all. I'm like, we kill cactus. I'm like, they don't stand a chance at our house. What I know is that though if I sow, if I plant, I don't actually control how things grow. I don't actually get to control that. I can do things that are going to help it, but how something grows, it's outside of my control. And it's never going to be inside of my control. I don't control the process of life. So what does God call me to do? He calls me to sow. And he says, I will bring about the growth. Our job when it comes to generosity is recognize that, God, I'm going to trust you with what I have. I'm going to sow with what I have. And I'm going to trust that you're going to do something with it rather than me trying to control all of it. This is a big one when it comes to our actual dollars. This will not be a surprise to anyone, but the studies out there show that in America, the average person gives 1% of their income a year. But we're Christians, and so we are better than that. We've bumped that up to 2.5%. And here's the deal. It's about control. It's about trust. Why do we not give our dollars? Because we wonder, well, if I don't move this situation here, then I'll have more to do here, and then I'll be able to shift this and do that, and we overcomplicate it. Rather than just saying, okay, Jesus, this is what's in my hands. What do I do with what's in my hands today? How do I respond today with what you've given me? How do I use what you've given me? All right, let's keep going, because I've got a lot more notes. What's one more reason that we don't actually step into the generosity that we are made for? And it's a disconnection from our impact. I was sitting with a couple friends last week, and one of them just bragging on their wife was like, my wife is extremely generous. She pushes me in that I'm not the generous person in our family. And, one of the guys I was with just said, hold on. That is not true. You may not feel like you carry the torch for financial generosity in your church, in your life. But let me tell you something. I watch the way that you serve our church. I watch how much time you give for our church. You are an extremely generous person. The problem was that there was a disconnection from impact. We don't always see what we're doing as generous. You don't see how you take space and sit with people. Listen to what's going on in their life. Give them that attention. Put your phone down in a conversation. Those are acts of generosity. Have you ever sat with somebody? Well, I'll just use myself as an example. My wife will often talk to me, and about halfway through the conversation, I think I'm listening. But she's like, you just picked up your phone. You are checking scores right now. And I'm like, no, I'm tracking. And she's like, track me with your eyes. Look at me, not your device. See, when I choose to put it down and engage, that's actually an act of generosity. It is giving of myself. It is giving of my time. It is giving of my presence. God, by his very nature, is generous. And so when we realize that we are made in his image, we then start to live the same way that he lives. He poured out his generosity in abundance. Think about when he created the world. There wasn't a lack of anything. He plopped Adam and Eve in this garden, and it had everything that they didn't even know that they needed. So extremely generous that it blew them away. Parents, let me tell you, you are doing that. Parents, you beat yourselves up a lot about what you're not doing. Let me tell you, you are doing an incredible job. How many times do you think for your kids without actually telling them that you've thought for what they need? No, I'm like, it's simple ways. You think it's a responsibility, but you go and you provide for them. You make sure they have the food that they need. You make sure they're getting the places that they need to be. You make sure that they are getting the time and attention that they need. You are giving to them in abundance beyond. And what you're just not doing is you're not crediting it to yourself as I am living out in the likeness of God. I am being generous. And so what you're doing by not recognizing I'm actually living out the nature of God, by loving my family, by showing up, by thinking for someone and doing something for them that they didn't know they needed. What you're doing is you're reinforcing the narrative that says, I'm not a generous person. I want to encourage you today to think of all the little things that you do. This is like a pat yourself on the back Sunday, where you need to make a list of every good thing that you've done for somebody. Because you need to remind yourself that I am actually living out my identity as someone who is generous.
with my time, with my resources, with my emotional energy with other people. I am being engaged with them. I am embodying generosity just like Jesus did. Speaking of people who embody generosity, Brent and Reba Bassett, guys, holy smokes. I feel so convicted every time I'm with them because they remind me so much of Jesus. What you guys don't know is they have chosen intentionally to live in a part of the city of Austin where it requires them to give themselves all the time. It requires that they give themselves, and they show up. And here's the deal. They don't live there because they have to. They live there because they choose to. Then, you know what? They're here every week. Not every week, but most weeks. And you know who's here with them? Their kids, and they're all serving. They all have got volunteer lanyards on, giving their time and attention. They are embodying generosity. See, generosity takes on many forms, but when we start to realize, no, I am made in the image of God, I am made in his likeness, and so I am just going to embody that where I go. So I may not have the ability to write checks with a lot of zeros. You know who didn't have the ability to write checks with a lot of zeros? Jesus. He didn't. He lived on support. So if you can't write checks with a lot of zeros, stop discounting yourself as not a generous person. That's not how that works. Generosity isn't something you achieve when you hit a certain level. It's about likeness. I am made in the likeness of God, and so I'm going to look at him, and then I'm going to live from that place. I'm going to live from the place that he says, I am a generous person because I am made in his image. And so I am going to run to the opportunities that I have to give myself. And the opportunities I have, they may feel small. They may just feel like they're in my home. Your world may feel small. You may be like, I only have these 3 areas where I can actually give of myself. Then give fully. Trusting, it's going to require you to say, God, I'm going to give of something today. And you know what? You're going to have to fill a gap. Because when I give this, I know I'm going to go without. Like, let's get super practical with it. Someone may need your time this week. They may need your time, and they may need your engagement. Like, they need you to not just be physically there, they need you to be fully there. And if that's you this week, here's what I want you to know. Something's probably going to happen in your week where you're like, I need time alone. Something's going to happen. You're going to feel like, man, I need to recharge myself. And then someone's going to be like, I need something from you. So it's going to be you choosing to say, I am going to give of myself, and I'm going to trust that God's going to fill in that gap. God's going to meet me where I am when I choose to live out who he's made me to be. He will meet me there. You guys can come out and get started. Here's what's often true, is that when we choose to engage this, it's going to cost you something. Like, let's just call it what it is. To be a generous person, to say generosity is going to be my standard, it's going to cost you. You got to give yourself to people, to give of your time, to give your dollars away. It's going to be a cost. You're going to have to give up something for the sake of something else. And I believe that what God wants to do is he wants to impart something to us that Jesus experienced. You've heard the scriptures where it says, for the joy set before him, Jesus endured the cross, scorning its shame. For the joy. For the joy set before him. He gave up his life. For the joy, he paid a cost. And I think he actually wants to impart that joy to us today. As we choose to look at maybe some areas where we're like, hey, you know what? This is the wall that I keep running into. This is the thing that when I want to be generous or I think I'm trying to do it, this is what I hit. This is the thing that constantly comes up. You know, I've talked about 4 things. Judy, will you put those up on the screen, those 4 things? Here's what I want us to do. The band's going to lead us in a song in a minute, and we're going to keep these up here, and I want you to ask the question, which one's mine? What's the wall that I need to go over, under, or around, or through so that I can step into more of who God has made me to be? How do I step into my identity more today? It's by looking at whatever's holding me back and saying, God, I'm going to choose to lay that down. And I'm going to choose to trust you. So why don't you go ahead and stand up? And I love like exercises, like practical little exercises. So we're going to do one real quick. I want you to just close your eyes. We want to be an open-handed people. So I want to encourage you just to, whatever one of those thoughts, fear of not enough, overload, control, disconnected from the impact you're already having, it's keeping you from stepping into the fullness of who God's made you to be. Just want you can even do this physically. I encourage you, stick your hands out. Pretend like you're dropping it. That thing that's been holding you from being who you've been made to be, just let it go. And now let's do a beautiful divine exchange. Just open your hands up and say, God, would you give me something in return? Would you give me something in return? Would you pour back into me because I've let go of something? Here's how God works. Whenever you let go of something, he wants to pour back into you. It doesn't matter if you're giving away something good or bad. When you say, God, I'm laying this down, he's saying, great, then I've got something new for you. So God, we declare right now that you are releasing an impartation of joy into us. The same joy that you set before Jesus, the same joy in our hearts that you put in people, you are releasing to this church right now. And so God, I declare, let a release of joy fall on our church. Let a release of joy fill our hearts. Let a release of joy be something we experience and we live in. God, let us worship from this place. Let us live from this place, and let us experience the joy overflowing that you have called us to live into. In Jesus' name.